2023 and you're somebody that believes there is such a thing as an establishment, or you believe there's a deep state, I don't know, maybe you've read a couple books about it, maybe you're not 100%, but you're thinking there's a possibility that it does exist. The guy here today, Tom Fitton, is one of the most hated guys by the deep state, by the establishment. Let me tell you why. He's like one of these guys that just constantly wants to sue you. His organization, the Judicial Watch, let me give you a couple of the lawsuits that he's done. Just very annoying type of lawsuits, okay? So here we go. Filed for records related to the death of Tafari Campbell. If you remember who that was, he was the chef for Obama's, when, he was a swimmer, but 3 feet deep, he died and all this stuff, and everybody wanted to know what happened there. Obviously, no one's talking about it now. He's the guy. His organization, Judicial Watch. Then you have wrongful death against the U.S. government for Ashley Babbitt. This is the girl in the middle inside the Capitol. Then he filed for records, his organization, for CBP, that's the Customs and Border Protection agents, welding open floodgates in the border wall in Arizona. Then filed records regarding communication between DHA Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. Then they challenged Illinois election laws and handling of voter registration. Then filed for records concerning censorship of social media users. Then filed for records of payments made by the FBI to Twitter. Filed for communications between agencies and social media platforms regarding content moderation censorship. Sued for YouTube censorship of a Judicial Watch video by Biden, corruption and election integrity. Uncovered coordination between Facebook and the CDC to control the COVID narrative. I mean, I can go on and on and on. It's constant. And, Judicial Watch got started, in 1998? This goes all the way back to having numerous high-profile investigations, including uncovering Hillary's private email server, obtaining documents related to the Benghazi attack, the IRS targeting scandal, the misuse of FISA warrants during the Russia investigation. I can go on and on and on, but it's great to have you on, Tom Fitton.
Good to be with you.
Yes, so
I'm thinking I got to find out what we got from some of those lawsuits you're reading,
and that's what I'm curious about. So for me, I got a series of things I want to go through with you. That I'm curious about. I want to talk to you about what Jim Baker and Jimmy Carter did years ago to try to have the mail-in ballots, the integrity of elections. I want to talk to you about the HR 8081, which I don't know if you've been following that. I'll read it to you. I want to see your thoughts on that. I got some questions on the Invention Secrecy Act of 1951. The DOJ can't release Biden-Hur due to deep fakes AI concern. A couple questions with China being held accountable. And then U.S. soldiers, 300,000, Russia, this story just came out. Bannon today, I'm sure you saw that, stuff that's going. There's a bunch of things to cover, right? But here's the first one. So for me, you watch the Democrats, they get up there, Letitia James, right? All these kids are, we're going to get him, and we're going to get him, and we're going to go after him, we're going to get him. I was like, okay, this is just a campaign. They're not going to do it, right? No. Here $430 million. E. Jean Carroll, $83 million. What the fuck is it? $83 million. And 34 convicted felony. Holy shit. Everything they're saying, they're following with their threats. On the other side, Republicans file a lawsuit. We're going to get them. Nothing happens, right? Why do you think, whether it's true, Tom, or if it's a reputation and an impression being made that the Dems, they follow through with their threats, the Republicans do not follow through with their threats? Why do you think that reputation is being built today?
Well, I don't think the Republicans do much in the way of even threatening. So I don't think there's much they're promising that they need to be held accountable for, because they don't really promise to do anything. There's not, oh, we're looking at impeachment, we're considering impeachment. They're not promising to impeach. And of course, they're not probably going to. There's an old book title that I like. You can trust the communists to be communists. And, when your enemies tell you what you're going to do, you should pay attention to it, especially if they've got a record of actually following through. And Republicans, or too many Republicans, but the number of Republicans who I think fully understand this is disturbingly small, engage in a lot of fear-based decision-making. They don't like scandal politics. They think it's a loser for them politically. And the target is someone that they don't really like that much, and that's President Trump. And so they were willing to see him abused and punished like no other politician in American history has been. And even as he's facing literally going to jail, there's still this muted response to it that to me is inappropriate, because I think, you know, we've had political prosecutions in the past. I mean, it happens but we never had this kind of general embrace of targeting a candidate or a politician like Trump by the Justice Department and Democratic Party allies in Georgia and New York. And that's never happened before. And it's kind of a brazen attack on the opposition. I mean, these investigations of Trump have led to them investigating the fundraising operations of the Republicans in multiple battleground states. They're trying to imprison those who question the election. And if the new rule is that we're going to act like Putin's Russia or Xi in China, that means the end of the republic, practically speaking. And I kind of worry that if it doesn't matter who wins, but unless we right the ship, we'll be kind of a zombie constitutional republic where we've got these kind of, oh yeah, we've got this constitution, we have these alleged civil rights that protect us and due process and all the Bill of Rights, but they're not enforced if you're of the wrong political party or you're outside the narrative that the communist left are pushing.
So let me ask, Rob, we can hear you, by the way, that you're listening to it. It comes to us as well. Yeah, if you can, Lord, a little bit. You know, to me, you know how there's forgive and forget, okay? Okay, let's not, I think the Republican Party forgives but doesn't forget. But I think the Democratic Party doesn't forgive and doesn't forget, okay? My opinion, okay? So on one end, it's kind of like, well, listen, you know, if you get elected, should you go after them for what they did to you? No, we should just let it go, and we should just move on, and we should try to bring the Constitution together. Hopefully, that'll set an example to the other side to, when it comes down to their term, to be, let's forgive each other and let's move on, let's make America a better place, and let's be more united than divided, right? Like when you think about the thing, you know, the election fraud that Jimmy Carter believed that the more, you know, mail-in ballots there's more possibility for fraud. This is many, many years ago that him and Jim Baker being the guy on the right who was a heavyweight guy.
Big time Mr. Republican. Yeah.
That's right. I don't know if you read his book, phenomenal book, but I watched James Comey before Trump became a convicted felon. They interviewed him. And they said, so, Mr. Comey, do you think, what do you think is going to happen with Trump? You think the judge is actually, you know, come out and, you know, he's going to be a convicted felon? And Comey says, yes, I actually think it will. So I'm like, he actually thinks he will. Yes, he will. Because at that time, the country was 50-50. There's no way they're going to say he's a convicted felon. Boom, Comey was right. Yesterday, Comey's being interviewed by Rob. If you have the clip from the part that I want, I don't know if you have it on the big clip. Play this clip. Is this the exact same one, Rob, that we showed earlier today?
The shorter version.
At the end of it.
No, let me go find that.
You know which one I'm talking about?
I do. This is the first clip that we played where they talk about Trump bagging.
I want the one.
Got it.
The one that you found all the way at the end, where Comey's being asked, do you think Trump will go to jail? Right? And the person asking a question, what's her name every time I forget her name?
Caitlin Collins.
Caitlin Collins. You know who she is. She's the one that the CNN debate.
Yeah.
And Comey's answer wasn't, you don't do this. Because when they asked Manchin's like, there's no way he's going to go to jail. There's no way they're going to sentence him. There's no way they're going to do anything like that. That's just not something to do. Manchin was, there's no way, right? Comey says something else. Rob, if you got to play the clip, okay? It was a little bit towards the end of it that you had it, Rob. Yeah, a little bit more. Right around there is when she starts asking and he gives the answer. Play the clip, we'll hear it.
Find that the defendant had acted in contempt of the court's orders on multiple occasions. All of that will be part of the picture that the judge looks at to decide whether a message needs to be sent that involves jail.
As a former FBI director, what's it like to see one of the major nominees of one of our parties, the presumptive nominee at this point, be a convicted felon?
This isn't it, Rob. Go back 20 seconds, 30 seconds. I really want to get Tom's feedback here. Played right there. See if it's...
I don't know. I would ordinarily say it's unlikely.
Go back 10 seconds. You have it. Okay, right here. She's going to ask the question.
Donald Trump, since, you know, I've last seen you on CNN, has now become the first former president to become a convicted felon.
There you go.
You predicted before the verdict came down, as the jury was still deliberating, as the case was still being presented, that he could potentially be convicted. Do you believe it's likely that the judge will sentence him to jail in this situation?
I don't know. I would ordinarily say it's unlikely in a white-collar offense of this sort, but this is a defendant who's begging for a jail term by taking a flamethrower not just to the judge, but to the entire process and the jury. A judge will take that very seriously into consideration in deciding whether to deter this person and to send a message more broadly. He needs to spend some time behind bars.
You think Judge Merchan should take everything he said, where, I mean, he has called Judge Merchan a tyrant. He likened him to the devil. Every day before he walked into that courtroom, he said he was corrupt, baselessly. Do you think the judge will take that into consideration when he does sentence him in a few weeks?
I do, as well as him having to find that the defendant had acted in contempt of the court's orders on multiple occasions. All of that will be part of the picture that the judge looks at to decide whether a message needs to be sent that involves jail.
Okay, pause it right there. So do you think Trump will be sentenced on July 11th? June 27th is the debate. July 11th is the sentencing. July 15th is RNC. Do you think he'll be sentenced to jail?
I think there's a significant chance that he'll be sentenced, incarcerated in some way, either jailed directly for a short period of time or a longer period of time where his freedom is restricted through some type of house arrest or something. And you kind of see Comey here, who's a deep state operative, a corrupt former FBI director who was fired, basically putting out the smoke signals for the judge, in case the judge is getting enough of them, that we want you to jail him. And this process is, and it kind of shows you the catch-22 Trump is in. We're going to come up with a manufactured crime, deprive you of your due process rights, impose unprecedented gag orders that we know you're going to violate, and then punish you when you complain with jail. Not necessarily for the crimes, but for complaining about the process that led to this unprecedented and compromised so-called verdict. It's about as legitimate as the O.J. verdict was.
Is about as legitimate as the O.J. verdict was, which is, you're being sarcastic, obviously, the complete opposite. But the reason why I'm asking this question is the following reason. Are you following the HR Bill 8081? Have you read this? I'm going to read it to you. So this is called the Disgraced Former Protectees Act. If you can go to the other link, Rob, right there, I just want to read it to you. So this is April 19th, 2024, right? Which is 6 weeks ago. Ranking Member Thompson introduces legislation to ensure no Secret Service protection for convicted felons sentenced to prison. Who's he talking about? There's no way they're talking about a president here, right? So let me continue. Today, Representative Benny Thompson, ranking member of the Committee on Homeland Security, introduced a denying infinite security and government resources allocated toward convicted and extremely dishonorable former protectees act, or the Disgraced Former Protectees Act. What are they talking about? This legislation would reform the U.S. Secret Service protective mission by automatically terminating Secret Service protection for those who have been sentenced to prison, keyword, sentenced to prison, following conviction for a federal or state felony, very specific who they're targeting, clarifying that prison authorities would be responsible for the protection of all inmates regardless of previous Secret Service protection. Here's the key sentence. Unfortunately, current law doesn't anticipate how Secret Service protection would impact the felony prison sentence of a protectee, even a former president. Okay? This legislation was co-sponsored by Representative Troy A. Carter, Barbara Lee, Frederica Wilson, Yvette Clark, Bonnie Watson-Coleman, Jasmine Crockett, Joyce Beatty, and Steve Cohen. So, as a regular person who's not in this space, I'm not a lawyer, I don't have Judicial Watch, I'm not involved in politics. I'm a guy that's been a financial services businessman, but I read contracts, and we have different types of things that we have to go through. The way I read this, if I was to say the opposition is evil, how would they set it up? We've tried character assassination. We've tried trying to take all your money away. We've tried putting a gag order on you that you can't campaign and have all these audiences coming up to you. We've tried silencing you. We've tried demonizing you. We've tried painting you as a convicted felon. We already have a mugshot of you. We've sold to the entire country that you are a criminal, is what we're selling you. None of this shit is working. You just raised a couple $100 million based on the $70 million from small money, another 150, 130, $200 million from big money that people are coming towards your side. There's only one thing we got left. We can't provide them protection. So guess what we're going to do? Let them debate June 27. July 11th, we're going to sentence him to prison. Then this is in effect, depending on how fast they can apply this. Now he's not got protection. Then it's a free-for-all on what happens there. How do you read this? This is how I read this. How do you read this yourself?
I read it, they want Trump to be dead. I'm not a lawyer either, but you see enough legislation. You see who promoted it, Benny Thompson, the leading Democrat in the House. They want Trump dead. To deny a former president Secret Service protection in these circumstances would almost certainly lead to his death. And they know what they're doing. And even talking about it is dangerous because we understand he still has Secret Service protection. But when you see the media start talking about this, you're going to get a nut or two who interprets it to mean, well, he doesn't have Secret Service protection now. Now we can go after him, and I'm going to try to target him. And who knows what happens when that happens. And it highlights to me that not all leftists or liberal Democrats or Democratic Party members or whatever are communists. But they've embraced communist means to achieve their political ends. They're allied with them in terms of the street actors. And now, again, this is something that Putin would clearly understand as a technique to ensure his political opponent is put in prison. They want to send Trump to Rikers with no Secret Service protection. What serious person would think that would result in anything other than the tragic death of President Trump? Terrible times we're in.
But how is it that if the way the Constitution was set up and the way our founding fathers created America, with the Supreme Court, with any of that stuff, would allow this to even progress to this levels? How does our system, our current system, allow for this to happen?
Our judicial system, especially with respect to Trump, is broken. They've allowed abuse that's never really happened before. The only check thus far, and it's not been a reliable one, but it's been a significant one, is the Supreme Court. And that's why the Supreme Court's under a vicious attack by the left. They're targeting conservative justices, their families and such. And in the end, that's the most reliable vehicle for protecting Trump from these abuses. Because right now, this train's left the station. You never want to be a defendant in a state court. And typically, it's hard to kind of get off that train until the process ends and you're incarcerated. And so what the challenge for President Trump and his legal team, in my view, is figuring out a way for the feds to get involved, the federal courts, ultimately the Supreme Court, to say in response to you, we're not doing this. It's obviously it was obvious the deficiencies in this court process up in New York made this whole process unconstitutional, designed to interfere in the election. Whatever the argument is, have the Supreme Court step in and stop this notion that Judge Merchant can run our federal election by constraining the President Trump, and his campaign. He's still under the gag order. So Judge Merchant's still running the campaign. President Trump can't speak forcefully about these issues, even though he is speaking forcefully, not as much as he could, and his campaign's being restricted. I mean, our system, it doesn't contemplate a state court judge managing a campaign like that. He was a political hostage for 6 weeks up there, as far as I'm concerned. Patrick, the election already is compromised. It already is compromised. And the question is, will the outcome in November be sufficient in a way that people are reassured that the election's been fixed and that the right person won in the circumstances that we're facing? And if Trump loses, many people are rightly going to say, well, they had their thumb on the scale, so it's no surprise.
If you think, as an enemy, as a competitor, you sometimes have to sit there and think about the moves your opponent and your enemy is going to make. And you have to go from fair play to gray area to dark to deception, right? So fair play. This guy's going to be a fair fighter. All right, if he beats me and knocks me out, he's a better fighter, fine. Gray. He may throw sand in my face and then, boom, try to get me not to see, and then that's how he's going to beat me. It's a little gray, but okay, fine. Dark. He's going to pull out a knife. deceptive. There's a guy behind me that's gonna, he's not even gonna fight me. He's gonna kill me way before I get there, right? Let's go to putting fair play out, because we know that's not gonna be the case, right? Go to gray, dark, and deceptive. What tools, what weapons, what methods that are left that hasn't yet been used can the opponent still use the next 4.5 months on the president?
Well, they can jail him. I think President Biden and the Biden administration could restrict access he has that candidates typically would to national security information, which would impair any transition to power. I think they could mess with the Secret Service short of this legislation. I think they would be tempted to do so. They've already misused the Secret Service to help enable that improper raid of his home, so who knows what else they'll do. The Secret Service is as compromised at the top, in my view, and as politicized as any other deep state agency. I don't know why we would think it's any better than anything else in D.C. So it's really bad. Now, on the other hand, they're kind of losing in some respects. As you pointed out, Trump is still doing well. And there are charges here in Florida and up in D.C. The federal versions of the Get Trump effort have been stalled. Fani Willis, because of her own misconduct, shut that case down. So they're losing some additional, they're losing some key vehicles there. Now, what did the left do in 2020? They went to the streets and engaged in violence. And so that's another arrow in their quiver. It's a reliable one. They use it time and time again. Political violence is key to the left's political thinking. They don't always use it, but they're willing to use it, and it wouldn't surprise me if they escalated it in that regard as well.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, if that's the case, a couple of them, it's publicly, we're looking at it, and it's obvious that they're doing it. What I'm curious about is, what are they going to do that we're not thinking about? Because this is not being covered enough by the market, right? The fact that they're putting this HR Bill 8081, that they're trying to get him to lose Secret Service, this only tells me one thing. There's no other way to process this. Why would you want to take Secret Service away from him? Check. That's easy, right? Couple of the other ways, I'm trying to wonder if there's anything else we're not paying attention to. Tom, you look like you're thinking something.
I am. I'd like to ask Tom a question, and I'll premise it with something. First of all, thank you for all you do, personally. This is from me personally.
Oh, you're welcome.
And I think part of this, people can get a civics lesson if they just follow some of the things, whether they completely agree with your approach or not, or even what you're saying. You can get a civics lesson in what the Freedom of Information Act and other things you can do as a citizen that I think are very important to be part of the process. My observation is, I think they went from, and I'd like to know what you think, to he won't win, but it was always a comma. We're going to hit him with all these indictments. We're going to say 96 counts. He won't win because the voters will be thinking he's a criminal, and that'll do it. It didn't, and he went up in the polls, and he even went to a point in North Carolina and Georgia, as you know, that all of the polls, including their polls, he's like 9 points up now. Say what you will about Fulton County, the rest of Georgia is bright red and upset.
Right.
Then, we'll convict him in New York. He'll be a convicted felon. He's a convicted felon, comma, he won't win. And the next day, we saw everyone in the media, they were using convicted felon in the same way, right on script. Do you think, from your perspective, that we've crossed from, if we do this, he can't win, to we can't allow it, and therefore the kitchen sink is on the table, including, a manipulated homicide?
Well, I mean, they're sending a signal out there that they want to put the president's life at risk, President Trump's life at risk. In 2020, they contemplated Trump winning and what they would do if he won. And the war game included John Podesta, and John Podesta pretending to be Joe Biden in a war game where there was a dispute about the Electoral College, a close count where Trump was winning. They would have the left-leaning states demand that the electors be seated they supported in order to change the outcome of the election, and the threat would be we're going to withdraw from the union if they don't do what we say. So they were actually contemplating civil war in 2020. Yeah, so that's what they were planning to do in 2020. So, of course, who gets prosecuted? People who actually disputed the election under law, rather than those who were evidently conspiring ways to engage in civil war against the republic. Then now we hear Democrats talking about, even if Trump does win, we're going to object to his electoral counts in Congress, not because the election was compromised, not because there was any evidence of fraud or administrative deficiencies that require a do-over, but because we don't think Trump is eligible for other reasons. So just a pure power play to overturn the outcome of the election. So they're never going to stop. I mean, they've impeached him twice. They're trying to jail him. They want him dead. And they're telling us what they're planning to do. They're talking about figuring out what to do in January if Trump wins. And you can bet there'll be more efforts to impeach him. They'll probably target his family more directly. They're never going to stop. They're never going to stop. And it's up to, if you like the Republic, whether you're liberal or conservative, I think you should be very upset about what's happening here. And I think this is where they're making a political mistake, because you understand why some of the bad guys do what they do, because they see a political benefit. But when Biden's out there advocating for, quote, democracy all the time, I think a lot of the blowback in favor of Trump is a concern about democracy or the constitutional republic. And they don't see a vote for Biden as advancing democracy. They see a vote for Trump as ensuring that sort of crazy politicization of justice stops. And so the pro-democracy vote, in my view, Trump is in a position to benefit from.
Trump is in a position to benefit from. Okay.
If you want to protect democracy, you remove from power those who are using the Justice Department to jail their political opponents. Purely